All right. All right. We are recording.
Great. Well, good morning. My name is Justin McAdam. I'm the chair of the Distressed Unit Appeal Board. Thank you for joining us today. I will call this meeting to order and recognize that we do have a quorum and have posted the notice of this meeting in accordance with the open door law. This morning is our first meeting under our new public comment policy. And so if you'll recall, at our last one of our meetings in July, we adopted a public comment policy to provide opportunities for members of the public to come before the board and provide comments and observations to us at the beginning of our meetings. We'll go through the overview of that process later, but for right now, if you have not yet done so, please send a chat message to Courtney, the meeting host in WebEx, to let her know that you would like to participate. We'll take another item today ahead of that to give you a little bit of time to connect with her. In your note, please let her know your name, address, and if you would, any specific topics that you plan to address. As a reminder, you'll have approximately 3 minutes, and we will provide a timer so that you can keep track of how long you're talking. With that, Courtney, I'll turn it over to you to provide our introduction on the WebEx conference.
Okay, thank you. So actually, before I do that, just real quick, I need to find Rebecca on the call-in user. So I have 2 users here that I'm going to unmute and ask if it's Ms. Kubacki, and if it is, please let me know, and we'll keep your line unmuted then. All right.
Yeah, I'm on the line, Courtney.
Rebecca, okay, there we go. We got you then.
Okay, all right.
All right. I will keep your line open on our side, so if you need to, you can mute it on your side.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, so for WebEx purposes, just wanted to give a couple of reminders for folks, similar to what we've done in the past. DUAB members and presenters can mute and unmute their lines as desired. All attendees will be on mute until, for the purposes of public comment, we will actually come in and unmute you, which we'll talk about that when we get to that part. If you do encounter any issues with WebEx during the meeting, I ask that you send me a chat message. And then we are recording this meeting, and it will be posted to our DUAB webpage and our YouTube channel after today's meeting. That is it.
Great, thank you, Courtney. With that, we'll turn to our first order of business today, which is the approval of our minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes today before us: the June 18th, 2020 minutes, the June 26th, 2020 minutes, and the July 9th, 2020 minutes. Those have been circulated to board members in advance of the meeting. Does anyone have any comments or additions to those minutes? All right, hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the June 18th, 2020 public meeting, the June 26th, 2020 public meeting, and the July 9th, 2020 public meeting as presented.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Rebecca.
Great, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Courtney, would you call the roll?
Paul Joyce?
Yes.
Wes Bennett?
Yes.
Tracy Brown?
Yes.
Rebecca Kubacki?
Yes.
And Justin McAdam?
Yes.
All right, 5-0.
Thank you. Minutes are approved. Our next item of business is our public comment period. As I said, each participant will have 3 minutes to provide comments. And should notify Courtney that they would like to participate. You'll find her in the chat box as listed as the meeting host. Courtney will call the name of the attendees who have signed up to provide public comment in the order in which they indicated they would like to speak. She will then unmute your line and confirm that we can hear you. You will have 3 minutes, and we will provide a timer to keep track of that time for you. At the end of your allotted time, Courtney will remute your line and move on to the next individual to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to provide their comments. Each speaker will have only one opportunity to speak per meeting. and questions to the board will not be answered. For those participating by telephone or others that are unable to sign up given our virtual platform today, we do encourage you to submit comments via telephone or via email to duab@duab.in.gov or by telephone to 317-234-2273, and please leave a voicemail there and that will be circulated to the members. With that, Courtney, do we have anyone signed up for the public comment today?
Yes, we do. Give me, our first speaker will be Michaela Spangenberg. Give me 1 second to get the timer up and running.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so let me. Okay. All right, Ms. Spangenberg?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Michaela Spangenberg. I am a resident of Gary. Thank you for allowing us to have public comment at this meeting. I want to address the kind of difficult situation that the people of Gary find themselves in at this moment as we're presented with a referendum that puts us between a rock and a hard place, because if the people of Gary vote in favor of the referendum, then we strongly suspect those funds are not going to be spent as advertised, and that then the failure of the referendum eventually will be used to prove that our problems are insolvable. On the other hand, if the people of Gary vote against the referendum, then we strongly suspect that our lack of willingness to endorse further mismanagement of our school corporation is going to be taken as a sign of our unwillingness to have these problems be solved. Many of these problems, of course, either began or were exacerbated during the takeover of our school corporation. And when we compare the referendum put before us now to ones that we've tried in the past, the language is much looser, and we know that they market tested this way back in the spring and summer to get an idea of the best way to present how they were going to spend the money. And if they were going to spend the money in any kind of transparent, helpful manner, that would not have been the case. They would have worked directly with the community and would have worked openly and transparently to let us know what their intentions were at that time. But the referendum is just one symptom of a larger problem, and we're desperately afraid as a community that the end result of this takeover will be either the dissolving of our school corporation or our loss of our high school and middle school education and/or middle school education systems completely. You know, once again, as a community, we ask that you reconsider your stance on approving a contract with MGT. You know, we've presented multiple different options, you know, of alternatives, including working directly with the community ourselves, as, you know, these kinds of state takeovers being managed by for-profit entities like MGT, you know, often result in failure, not success. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today, and I hope that you'll make the right decision.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. Next up, we have Tracy Coleman. Tracy, give me 1 second. I will unmute you. All right, Tracy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, great. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Attorney Tracy Coleman. I'm a member of the Westside Leadership Academy, PTSA, and also I'm a parent of a student that attends Gary School. I would just first say that I'm in support and agreement with the letter sent by our PTSA President, Robert Coleman, regarding issues concerning the referendum, academics, and other things. What I would like to discuss now is that I'm very concerned that already at the beginning of the school year, our children have missed 3 days of school. Our president has presented letters showing concerns that when the decision to purchase the Chromebooks was based in part on their low street value, how we were insulted by this and concerned by it. And the fact that our school system had to be closed for 3 days with a storm, which we're in the Midwest, and the reality is you're going to get a lot of storms. We're very concerned, and that goes to being cheap and be costly, because we live in a city which is about 57 square miles. So what I'm asking is that DUAB do an independent evaluation to see if we have the infrastructure.
Are you there, Ms. Coleman? Ms. Coleman? Can others still hear her?
No, I cannot.
Okay.
Why don't we move to the next one, and then if Mrs. Coleman can connect again, we'll give her the balance of her time.
Okay.
Should not allow this.
Oh.
There you go.
Ms. Coleman, you actually, for about 30 seconds there, we were unable to hear you. So if you want to rewind a little bit, we'll give you the extra time to do that.
Okay, I appreciate that. I don't know.
We lost it to Gary is 57 square miles.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Joyce. When I talk about Gary being 57 square miles, and that was one of the reasons that parents were very interested in what type of equipment they were using, what type of cell phone service that they were using, because we knew in the end that's going to impact how successful that equipment works. And we have areas like in Miller where you have the lake, that reception service, sometimes it goes out. But our kids cannot be penalized where they're already missing 3 days and the school year has just started. And once again, Gary was not the only.
I'm not sure what's going on. Has she dropped it again? Or?
Yeah, I cannot hear her again. Ms. Coleman? Ms. Coleman, are you there?
Solve the digital divide or
Ms. Coleman, your phone cut out again, or your connection cut, and we were not able to hear you for a little bit there. Why don't we move? We'll come back. Why don't we come back to Ms. Coleman? We'll give her an opportunity to make her comments again, as she's had a challenge there. Give her a chance to reconnect.
Okay. Next up, we have Kendra Johnson. Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson, I've unmuted you. Are you there?
Good morning to each and every one of you.
Good morning. All right.
Well, I'm ready when you are.
All right, go ahead.
My name is Kendra S. Johnson, and I've been a parent of the Gary Community School Corporation for 25 consecutive years. My concern right now involves the Title I funding. I have been working with parents, as I said, being an advocate, and one of the biggest problems and challenges parents are having is with the e-learning. Now, Title I funds can be used to help train parents on how to operate the technology and also to provide equipment for the students so that they can use. And many of the problems I'm hearing, not just from the Gary Community School Corporation, but from other parents, is involving the equipment as well as trying to master how to get on with e-learning. Secondly, because of the e-learning, many of the parents have to rearrange their whole schedule just so they can be at home or have someone at home to make sure their children are getting in on time and also remaining on the e-learning. And since I know you all are over the funds, I wanted to bring that to your attention because extra funds might be needed for training with the parents. And I would love to meet with you and also with the members of Region 5 Title I, because what we do is we train other parents to be involved with their children's education. And, you know, we would like to meet with you, the Gary Community Schools, to try and offer this service so that the children will be able to get the best education and will not be left behind. Because I know this is unique because of coronavirus. This is unique. This is something we've never faced before, but it's something we should be able to master and surpass because we always say it's for the children. Well, let's not just say it's for the children. Let's do it. And also, sadly, there was a communication problem because I missed my son's graduation from Westside. My last child, I missed his graduation because I was not notified in a timely manner. And I was not notified in a timely manner that when the graduation was. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have Mr. Bugs. I believe he has called in, and so I have a couple of users here that I think could be him. So I'm going to go ahead and open up these lines and call for Mr. Bugs, and if that's you, please respond.
Yeah,
Mr. Bugs, is this you? No? All right.
Can you all hear me?
Mr. Bugs, there you go. Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Bugs.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to get right into it. I want to talk about, first of all, the referendum.
Hey, what's the problem?
I was a little bit insulted.
It's at me. Said you what?
I was a little bit who is that? I was a little bit insulted that the advisory board sent out a recommendation per law to DUAB and to MGT, and it wasn't even acknowledged. But then a preacher can get up and make a suggestion that the referendum be raised from 16 cents a day to 20 cents a day. But what they didn't tell the public is that it was actually the expeditious way in which you all changed that. You changed it from 46 cents to 56 cents, but you're not telling the public that. Also, you're not telling the public that everybody will be paying a different amount. It is not 20 cents a day for everybody. Right now, you'll be paying 56 cents per $100 a cents evaluation for your property. If you own a property $100,000 to $200,000, you're going to be paying about $2,000 a year extra every year for the next 8 years. You're not telling the public that. The other thing is about the teachers' raises. At the end of that 8 years, you're not telling the teachers that the funding, if the referendum passes, stops at that time. Now, it was said on the radio that the president of the teachers union said that it would be rolled into the budget. Now, the budget has not been balanced. The other thing is this is an operating budget. But in that budget, in this referendum, operating referendum, but in the referendum, you have trying to assist in balancing the budget. And the only time you can balancing the budget is not an everyday operation unless you're on a pay-by-pay status, pay as you go, So these things that you're not telling the public, and I think it's a disgrace. The other thing is we have been trying to get answers about this deficit from Mr. Marsh. Not Marsh, Mr. Parrish. He said he reduced the deficit from 22 million to 6 million. Nobody has gave us that information to show where he has actually done that. We think this referendum actually is supposed to help them get out of this quagmire that they're in, help them balance the budget which they was paid for. The other thing is, I sent you all information, stats from the Indiana Department of Education, what the graduation rate, enrollment rate, and loss of students, which is 500 from the district since MGT started. And you all still gave them another 2-year contract, and they've been failing all the time with an option of a 3rd year. Now, for all of those millions of dollars that they have received, what have they done? When they came in, according to Gateway, the loan debt was about $105 million. As of a couple of days ago, it's $94 million. That $8,500,000 that they said that they.
Mr. Buggs, your time has run up. If you want to wrap up quickly.
Okay, I just want to let the people know that I think it's an insult to the citizens of Gary that you raise a referendum from 46 cents to 56 cents and not explaining that to the public. I think you're trying to put a sham over on them. And then lastly, they always want to get the black preachers when they want to sham the black community, and I think that's a disgrace to us. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The last person I have is to go back to Ms. Coleman. I'm going to see, I think she has called in on telephone. I'm going to see if I can locate her here. Ms. Coleman, is this you?
Yes, it's me. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
And I'll continue about the digital divide and the achievement gap. Our Westside Leadership Academy, PTSA, we are doing a virtual get-together this Friday because there are many parents who are engaged, but there are issues with the technology, and that's where I'm really asking DUAB for an independent investigation, that we need to make sure we have the proper equipment and everything's working properly. And also, I will express my concerns, too, as a person living here with the whole issue of asking citizens to pay more when we're actually in the middle of the pandemic. Gary, Indiana has one of the highest unemployment rates, and many of our residents are actually losing properties in tax sales. So as a community, we have to be compassionate with what our community is going through. And so I'll just submit, being born and raised here, when those tax caps hit and Roosevelt was taken for the community, no one really showed compassion that now you have a school district that's at a negative of about $5 million. Even in basic government, when huge financial decisions are made, you have to calculate the long-term ramifications of those budget changes. The reality in Gary in 2010, you're looking at a budget that was about $166 million. And now in 2020, you're looking at something that's around $74 million. But no one looks at this community in Gary and gives anyone credit or understanding that as a community, you've taken your budget down to $74 million. So the danger is, instead of giving this community an opportunity to breathe and figure out how to live in a right-sized budget, we
Ms.
now
Coleman,
have
if you could wrap up in 30 seconds.
Yes, we now have a system in place that actually wants to increase expenses. And that's one thing that I really asked DUAB to do. A community that went from 166 million to 74 million. Now there's a push to increase expenses when your for-profit company has decreased your employee compensation about 11 million, but they increased the purchase services by about over 6 million. So our community deserves fair reporting. We're generally accepting accounting principles, and we deserve respect to be given the right numbers to make the right decisions, not under a pandemic and stress, but with respect and basic professional courtesy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Courtney, was there anyone else who signed up to provide comment today?
No, that is the last person. Before we move on too far, though, I need to switch back my screens and then also relocate Ms. Kubacki.
Great, thank you.
Give me one
I do want to say thank you to everyone who provided comment today. We appreciate you taking the time to join us and share your thoughts with us.
Okay. We've got that. Now just give me 1 second to find. All right. Ms. Kubaki, is this you?
I'm on.
All right. Excellent. Then we are good to go, Chair. Justin, I think you're muted.
It was bound to happen.
There you go.
Our next item is an update from the manager for Gary Community Schools. We have Dr. Paige McNulty with us today to provide an update on how things are going and the opening of school. Dr. McNulty?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, I want to give you a couple of highlights. It's been a busy several weeks since we spoke last. We did open school last week briefly. There was a big storm that came through Gary, as you heard, through the Northwest Indiana region. So we did have to close school for a couple of days. In fact, I was supposed to go on the radio this week for my weekly radio show, and the radio station is still closed down because of the power lines that are still down and trees that are still down everywhere in Gary. So we're hoping that that gets rectified soon. We are up and running, though. School has begun back this Monday. We do have students actively engaged in learning and teachers at our school. We are doing synchronous instruction Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and asynchronous Thursday and Friday. And in addition, we are having special ed students come into the building for their speech, OT, social work services, etc. Our CTE programs are coming in hybrid on Tuesdays and Thursdays to work with their instructors for their hands-on certification experiences that they need. And we have partnered with some local agencies for those families that still need to take their students to a place during the day. So we have partnered with the Boys and Girls Club and have helped provide some paraprofessionals to them, the YWCA, and a local church. And we have one of our teachers actually going to one of our local churches that we have a pot of students there working with. So we do understand, as me being a mom with twins who are doing e-learning right now, that this is a new endeavor for all of us. And we are doing modules for our parents so that they can get some more help on how to log in and help their students, and for students to learn, because this is a new endeavor for all of us. So we have partnered with the PTA, and they're coming Friday to videotape a module for our parents that we can post up on our website. And then we are offering in-person training in groups of 10 next week at the West Side High School, so parents can come in, or students if they need some extra help. But I think we're off and running. We are still enrolling lots of kids. We have we have 3,701 students as of this morning enrolled, and parents still enrolling all day long. So we are up and rolling. In addition, I wanted to say that we did receive yesterday notification that we did receive the GEARS grant that we had applied for. We did receive $212,000, so we were happy with that news. We do have to share it with one of our non-pubs, but we will be using that money for any additional funds that we need for technology needs during this COVID situation. I also wanted to say that I did get a call this morning from the NAACP, Steve Mays, who wanted to share with me that one of our students from the Fine Arts program, Miss Naomi Martin, was notified today that she won the National Axel Gold Award for classical music. And she was up against other students from the Juilliard Fine Arts and lots of big schools, and she was the national winner. So we are very proud of our fine arts program. I wanted to make sure I gave her kudos, so that's a big deal. So with that, if there's any questions, I'll take any from the group.
Thank you, Dr. McNulty. I appreciate that. Do you feel that at this point you have sufficient funding and resources to handle the e-learning demands that you have?
I think any superintendent would tell you, or emergency manager would tell you, that they always need more funding. But yes, we feel like we've got enough Chromebooks at this time. We have the proper cameras that we need. We've been able to provide our staff members with laptops. We did deploy our old laptops, however, to our staff. So with this money, we'll be able to get some newer laptops that have better cameras for our teachers when they go home for asynchronous instruction. We do need more PPE supplies. They're on back order as they are across America. We have been able to give out the masks and the hand sanitizers, but we are still looking for vendors who can help us with some more PPE supplies. We are fogging all the buildings weekly, and we are right now working with that vendor, and that's so far going okay. So I think we're all right.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Representative Smith.
May I ask a couple of questions of Dr. McNulty?
Yes, please do.
Yes. Why was the decision made to abandon instructional e-learning during the storm period? Could you tell us why? Was there some breakdown in technology and airway problem? What was the basis of the decision?
Courtney or Justin, can you help me? I couldn't hear everything.
Yeah, Representative Smith had a little bit trouble understanding you, but I think what you asked was why can they explain why the technology issues, why they had the technology issues they encountered after the storm, and how they made the decision to delay school until the start of this week?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so the power went out in Gary because of the storm, the microburst storm that came through, and so we felt that we had received word that our power was back up because it was. Then when we started school the next day, we realized that the T-Mobile towers were also down, so we had pockets around the city that were not able to access those hotspots through our Chromebooks. So it was a perfect storm, if you will. So we had to close school down so that students could have time to get back on the internet.
You indicated that the student population is now 3,700. How does that compare to the previous year?
Yeah, so at this time, so let me explain that a little bit. So we're doing things a little bit differently as far as my reporting this year. I'm using what I call butts and seats numbers. So these are actually students that are here, not the rollover students. So there's the enrolled student number, and then there's the actual registered number. So I'm giving you the actual registered number, kids that we're seeing the whites of their eyes, that's 3,701. So from this time last year, that would be, I'd only be able to show you an enrollment number because we're using a new student database system. But we are actually on track for how many students were here last year. We're within 10 students at this point, data point from last year.
Of actual students there?
Of actual students there, right.
Okay, now we gained from Roosevelt students, but we're now down. Can you explain that?
Well, we're still enrolling students. That's the problem.
Okay.
How many?
Just not uncommon.
Do you have a sense of how many of the Roosevelt students have chosen to enroll in Gary at this point?
I don't have that exact number, but I do think that we have about 40% of those students.
And it was up to them to choose whether they chose Gary Community Schools or one of the charter schools or other options in the area?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, relative to that, if the state gave Roosevelt back to the Gary Community School Corporation, why didn't we just automatically tell those students that they were enrolled? We know that they have the freedom of choice, but why did we not tell them that they're now part of the Gary Community School Corporation?
Dr. McNulty, can you speak a little bit? I think that gets into some of the complexities about how the state board and DOE treat the transition from one to the other.
So it was my understanding that that school district and that school district number was dissolved. So therefore those students and those families had a choice at that point of what school they wanted to enroll in the future.
In other words, you couldn't automatically enroll them in Gary schools.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other questions for Dr. McNulty?
Mr. Chairman, I have a quick question.
Yes, please. Go ahead, Wes.
Dr. McNulty, could you talk real quickly about where you are with hiring a CFO?
Yes, we hired a CFO approximately, I'm going to say a month ago, and her name is Nicole Wolverton, and she had been consulting with us from the Cinder Group, and we were able to absorb her and hire her on as the CFO.
And one more question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. I've done some research on these Chromebooks, and I found out that that seems to be the text. I'll call it a textbook, electronic textbook of choice across the state. The reasons given to me were, and if you can agree or disagree, I'd like to get your opinion on this, is that system and that operating system and that product, if you will, far exceeds and has the best e-learning tools for both the student and the teacher. Can you confirm that?
Are you asking?
Yeah, Dr. McNulty, I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. Yes, the Chromebook is the most widely used device across school districts, and that was researched. I can tell you, again, from my own personal experience, that my kids were using their own personal iPads, and that was not working. So yesterday, in fact, my husband had to go up to their students' home school and pick up Chromebooks because they are the one that is the most compatible with all the educational platforms that are being used.
Yeah, I found that out, that the vast majority of schools in Hendricks County are using the Chromebook, and that also appears across the state. So thank you for confirming that. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Other questions for Dr. McNulty before we move on?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, one additional question.
Yes, Representative Smith.
Kendra Johnson mentioned parental training for e-learning. With the grant that you received from the governor's office, designated money that has been set aside for e-learning, do you plan to do parental training?
We definitely plan on doing parent training. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Dr. McNulty, I believe you have your Chief Academic Officer here with you today, Ms. Kimberly Bradley. Would you please introduce her for us?
I would love to. I'm excited and pleased to present Ms. Kimberly Bradley. Ms. Bradley actually is a product of the Gary School District. She started her career teaching in Gary. She's been a teacher, she's been a principal for many years, and she was the director of the Title I services and a central office administrator for the last 7 years. So it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Bradley.
Welcome, Ms. Bradley.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good morning. And I am very excited to be back in Gary and working with Dr. McNulty. It's been a lot happening, of course, with the pandemic, but I think that we're moving in the right direction, and I am very excited about the opportunities for our students.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Bradley? Well, we look forward to working with you more and getting to know you, and I'm sure you'll have a very interesting start to your career here at Gary Community Schools.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have an update on the School Improvement Fund plan. You'll recall that this is the result of the legislation from this past legislative session that allowed Gary Community Schools to shift some of the money it was spending on loan payments for Common School Fund loans to be able to use that money now for capital improvements in the district. We have Rob Tanner, who is a member of the MGT team, here to speak with us about how that is going and give us an update on where things stand. Mr. Tanner?
Good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here. I assume you all got a copy of the report that we submitted, and so I don't want to necessarily read from that, but I do want to hit the highlights, and then, you know, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer. The biggest thing as far as that report goes I did want to mention that the plan for that is, I know when you've seen it, it has red text there for what the newest updates are. As we go further on month to month, we will change the red text to black. And that way, two things from that. One, you will be able to see the newest updates in red text every month. And then also we will have a living document that kind of shows all of the progress over time. The largest piece of update I have is we do have the architect RFP was posted in mid-July. We have received bids back, and we are currently evaluating them and hope to select an architect for the large critical projects that will be going on over the next several years. Those will be the HVAC upgrades, the chillers, the boilers, the cooling towers, and quite a bit of roofing work. Also, this is not necessarily part of the 1065 funds because I think it's been funded at least initially with other funds, but there has been a lot of painting going on at West Side, and I think we're now have moved on to Gary Middle School. I sent a couple of pictures of the locker painting with the report. As well, we have started with the graphic design pieces. We still haven't got a bid in for the banners, but I've submitted some of the mock-ups for that. But we have started on, or I think we finished at this point, painting of the doors and some of the columns and different things where some of the graphics in the school at Westside Leadership Academy will be placed so that when we do get those bids in, the company can go ahead and put those graphics up. It really does, at least in my opinion, provide a great splash of color and hopefully a sense of pride to the students and the community that, it's not just the browns and the tans. It's a splash of school color. We also on there, we had a great design made in partnership with the graphic designs program at Gary Community Schools. And I don't know if you can see on there, in every school, we're going to make a 6x8 sign out front where it shows the scope of work over the 5-year period for each school. There's going to be a QR code on there where they can scan with their phone, and it will take them to the updates web page that's been created for the 1065 program. Also on there was renderings of the beverage playground replacement. I'm happy to say that Kid Stuff Place Systems was awarded the renovation or the new playground for beverage. They're located in Gary, Indiana. And it's beautiful. If you've had a chance to look at it, it's very beautiful. It's ADA compliant. It's going to have that rubber surface so that you can get wheelchairs out onto it. It's going to have a wheelchair ramp up to a piece of it. It's really a state-of-the-art playground. It's very nice. General updates, one of the things I know is important, we've developed a rubric for awarding the projects as they come in. The biggest piece that I wanted to talk about with that is that there is a preference for Gary businesses as well as women and minority owned businesses. Although, you have to look at cost, experience, and references and their capacity to do the work, but there is, at least a 10% preference to Gary businesses as well as a 5% preference to women and minority-owned businesses. And then the last thing that I would like to talk about is the transparency webpage or the school improvement fund page for all the 1065 improvements. And there's going to be pictures, and there's a brief description of what the 1065 Act is. There's a video on there that's really nice. It kind of shows West Side painting projects. But as we go along, we're going to continue to update that and put pictures, as well as where we stand with how much money's been spent, what it's been spent on, so that the general public can see what, where this money is going. And again, going back to having those signs at every school, when they take their phone and they go on that QR code, they'll be able to see, they'll take them to that web page where they can see the updates or the newest updates for themselves.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Yeah, I appreciate that update. Have you received, well, a couple questions. Are you, would you say that we're on track currently with the 1065 plan, that we're where we want to be in terms of progress with getting those projects completed?
I think we are. We're going to have to maybe adjust a little bit of the phasing, because I think one thing that was brought up, which is very true, especially in my experience with the roofing projects, we're estimating somewhere between $7 and $9 million in roofing projects. So we're going to have to spread those out. For nothing else, that's just such a large roofing projects overall that we will artificially inflate the cost of roofing projects for ourselves, because if we don't, it will spread those out. There's just not going to be enough capacity in the area to even perform the work. And so we're going to artificially, end up costing us more money. So we're going to hit the most critical ones first and kind of spread those out. Same thing with the boilers and chillers and HVAC projects. So I think there'll be some minor changes in where they fit in phase 1 or phase 2, based upon, how much work there is.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, obviously we want to get the best pricing, and we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot, so to speak, as we're trying to squeeze as much as we can out of these dollars. So
right,
appreciate that. On the question of the rubric for scoring projects, have you received, for the RFPs that you've had out so far, have you received a lot of inquiries from Gary businesses as well as minority and women-owned businesses?
The only one the biggest one we put out would be the architect. And I think we got 5 bids, and none of those were from Gary. We did have a minority-owned business in there.
Okay. Can you speak a little bit about what you guys are doing in terms of how you're getting the word out about the opportunities to apply for these projects? I think I've heard that you're working maybe with other stakeholders in the Gary community to do that.
Absolutely. I think it's the Gary Chamber of Commerce. We're letting them know, as we did with the RFP for architects, but we will let them know every time we post one, so that they can get out. And I'm trying to think of, is it Chuck? I think is the gentleman there, has been very gracious and very happy to hear from us when we've been able to contact him and say, hey, these are going to be out there.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I have another question before we jump to the boards. I'm going to monopolize the conversation for a moment, but this might be more of Rob, this might be a question for you. It might be a question for Eric or Dr. McNulty, but in terms of the preference policy rubric that we've put in place, is that something that Gary Schools has considered more broadly outside of the 1065 lane? Have you considered that for other projects for the district or other purchasing initiatives?
Hey, Rob, I'll jump in. This is Eric Parrish. Good morning, everybody. Yes, Chairman McAdams, looking backwards from 1065, we have seen that we've used local preference periodically in RFPs that have been released. And there hasn't been a lot of RFPs over the time. But there has been incidents where we did have local preference. And then sadly, I say there's times that we did not have local preference. Going forward, we'll use the 1065 rubric as a baseline and to take that experience of what we've had in the past and what we've using out of 1065 and go forward, that a local preference will be included in all vendor bids or RFPs, requests for proposals, RFIs, RFQs. So we will adopt a policy. We're in the process of that conversation. We want to make sure we get it right, that it's flexible enough, it doesn't constrain us in a way that it has an unintended consequence, but we definitely do want to include that local preference in all procurement going forward.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. I'd encourage you to bring that back to the board when you have that, just to keep us up to date on how that's going and how that's progressing, and give us awareness of those efforts.
We'll do that next month.
Great. Look forward to it. Other questions for Mr. Tanner or Eric regarding this 1065 Capital Improvement Fund?
Mr. Chairman, this is Wes.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Mr. Tanner, could you speak real quickly? I think I know the answer, but I just want to hear it from you in regards to your architect. Is this a request for services from the architect for phase one, or is this through the whole phase? Is this someone you're going to be working with through all the phases, or is this just for phase one?
Oh, sorry. No, this is a multi-phase project. This architect will be doing all of the, I don't have the list right in front of me, but it's going to be all of the roofing projects through all the phases and all of the HVAC projects.
Okay, good. All right. So this will be a general, you'll probably treat them as a general architect through the whole phases of the project.
Correct. They're going to be doing, correct.
Thank
also
you.
to help us with that staggering of where we should put them, use their expertise.
Do you see any issues with weather coming into play with the installation of that playground?
I don't think weather will have for the initial installation of the equipment. They're telling me it's a 3 to 5 month manufacturer, so that's going to put us into basically the dead of winter, December, January.
Right.
The actual installation of the equipment, probably not.
Okay.
It will probably come into play when that rubber surface is a poured surface. So that, I believe, does have to be a certain temperature before they can pour it. I know it has to be a freezing for sure. So that might play a little bit into the opening because of that reason.
Give us a sense of the size of that. What's the footprint of that? Looks like you have 2 playgrounds. You have the swing sets, and then you have the playground area. Give us a sense of the size real quick. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I do not know I know it's listed there, but I don't have it off the top of my head, the square foot. But it is rather large because it's going to be 3 separate play areas in that poured surface. One's like a fitness area, then there's kind of some smaller slide group for younger kids, and then there's a larger one. So, I mean, you're looking at, just off the top of my head, you're probably looking at 2,000 square feet, probably, so bigger than a home, a residential home. And then the swing set is going to be separate, and it does not have that poured surface. It's actually, we're going to use mulch chips because it's really more of a better safety for the swings, because you can fall from a higher height there, and that gives a little bit more impact resistance there. And so, but it is I believe an 8-bay swing set, and you're looking at the bays are usually 8 feet apart, so you're looking at 64 feet long just in the swing apparatus there. And then 72 inches on the ends for the play surface and 2 times the swing radius on the outside. So, I mean, it's pretty big.
That's great. We're glad to hear that. Thank you. Are there other questions for Mr. or Eric? Did you have a comment there?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I'll ask Rob to comment briefly and educate folks like myself. I had to ask this question. When I think of an architect, I think of a person who sits in a room and draws blueprints to build a building or a house. And I had the question, why are we hiring an architect? So Rob, can you, I'm assuming other folks might have the same question, and you answer that very well for me. So can you share that, why it's so important to start with an architect?
Absolutely. It is, well, multiple reasons. One is, yes, they do sit in a room and design buildings. I mean, they do that. And I think that is the what most people think of when they think of an architect. But what they're going to do for us is they're going to come out for our roofing, for example. They're going to come out and they're going to do core samples of the roof to see what we have there. Do we have deterioration in, the subsurface of our roofs? So they're really going to do a deep dive into, determining what it is we need. They also are up to date on the construction methods and most up to date on the newest techniques and materials. So they have a very good idea of what needs to be done at each school for whatever different type of roof you might have or different type of mechanical system you might have. And then what they're going to do is they're actually going to draw up a set of specs. They're going to draw up construction drawings. They're going to produce those. And they are going to help us with the RFP and submitting those and then answering the technical questions that contractors will have when, as they go to bid. And then they will also serve as our inspectors, if you will, as the construction goes forward, to make sure that the techniques and materials that are specified are being used and being used correctly as we go forward.
Appreciate that. That's something I didn't understand, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Essentially, you're saying they're our experts on the ground. They're going to make sure it gets done right and gets done correctly and gets done up to code.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please, Representative Smith.
One quick question. You mentioned banners. Could you give me more information on the nature of the banners that have not been posted? Are those interior or exterior?
I think I heard you asking about banners.
Yeah, let me ask it again. I don't know what happened with my computer, but could you give me more information about the nature of those banners and that you said that they have not come in, and are they interior or exterior banners?
Yes, actually, both interior and exterior. We've gotten the A bid on them, and they're having a hard time finding other bids. To be honest with you, is kind of what's holding us up. But they are going to be like long banners out in front of Westside Leadership Academy. It's going to have the school mascot on there, and so they hang from like the roof almost to the ground in a couple of places. But then also on the inside, like when you go in the door, there's on the outside when you go in the door, there's another big banner. It's kind of got some motivational words and got the school mascot on it. On the inside, it's more graphics, like graphic clings, like those that go on, like we paint a wall in the school colors, and they're going to have like different emblems or motivational sayings or something like that on them.
What do means of advertisement of your request for bids was used, and were there any outreach to local business?
I'll have to come back, get that information for you, because I'm not 100% sure. It was being done through the graphic arts program at Westside, the career and technical program there, and through the teacher that runs that program is where we were getting those from. She was helping us because I think they made the mock-ups for what the banners are going to look like.
And they only appeal to one company, or only one company?
I think they only got a bid from one company. Was the issue? Yeah.
Advertisers, because I didn't know that the local.
I don't think they put out an RFP, to my knowledge. I'll have to get back to you because, like I said, I haven't been involved on that end of it. It was not part of 1065, but I thought it was worth mentioning.
What dollar amount have you allocated for the purchase of these families? What do you see this project maybe cost?
What dollar amount have I allocated for what?
For the cost of these families in your budget.
Oh, I have not. Like I said, it's outside of 1065. It's not 1065 fund.
So it's coming out of operational dollars?
That's my understanding.
Eric, can you speak to that at a high level?
Yeah, I'm actually going to kick that over to Dr. McNulty, who had created that budget for the upgrade of West Side and a couple of other schools.
Yes, so some of that is coming out of capital, and some of it also is coming out of, I think it was just capital, Eric.
And do you know about how much we're spending on that project overall, the sort of beautification of the schools?
The painting, I think roughly was about $35,000, and I can't tell you off the top of my head for the banners, but I can definitely check and make sure that I get it to you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Maybe bring that back as part of the next update.
Sure, no problem.
Dr. Smith, did you have other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. With that, we'll keep moving along on our agenda. Our next item of business today is the consideration of the contract between DUAB and MGT, or Gary Schools Recovery, for management services of Gary Community Schools. I will give a brief overview of the contract. If you recall, at our prior meetings, we discussed the decision to rehire MGT, and the board voted to approve the rehiring of MGT for 2 years, and committed it to me as chairman to negotiate the details of that contract initially. I have done that, working closely with Courtney and board counsel Dan Shackle in negotiating the terms of the contract. I think what you'll find is that the terms of the contract are largely similar to the terms of the contract that we have had in place for the 3 years prior, although we have made substantial modifications to the performance benchmarks as our understanding and the circumstances on the ground have changed in the 3 years since we first became engaged in this project. We did circulate a draft of this contract to each of the DUAB members a little over 2 weeks ago, and so everyone has had an opportunity to review that contract and provide feedback in that time. And we have had conversations individually with each member to understand their concerns and thoughts regarding the contract. Just as a reminder to those listening in and for members of the board, the contract for management services with MGT is paid out of state funds directly. There's an appropriation in the state budget for $5 million to cover the cost of this engagement, as well as the other costs of the Distressed Unit Appeal Board. The contract is not covered and not paid for in any part by funds that are allocated to Gary Community Schools, either as part of the state budget through the tuition support allocations or the other education allocations, or the property tax revenues that are raised for Gary Community Schools there locally. With that, I'll give a brief outline of the contract. I won't hit on all of the provisions. I just want to hit on really the highlights and perhaps the major changes in the contract to draw attention to those, and certainly give a little context to the contract in those places. One of the first things, and I think one of the more significant things that we did in this contract, is we have formally made the change in title from emergency manager to manager here in the contract. I think we've heard, and through a lot of our conversations here at the board, but also elsewhere with members of the community, that moniker of emergency manager really brings a connotation to the project that perhaps does not reflect where we are today and does not reflect the progress that has been made over these last 3 years in stabilizing the financial picture of Gary Community Schools and the progress towards financial solvency that has been achieved. And I think, you know, continuing to use the term emergency does a disservice to the project. And so while we have not changed the underlying duties or authority of the manager, Gary Schools Recovery in this instance, we have changed that term, and we would certainly invite all members of the board and members of the public and members of the media and other stakeholders to make this change in their parlance in referring to MGT and GSR as the manager and not the emergency manager. Obviously, this will take some time as we've used this term for 3 years now. And so I suspect that we'll all slip up as we move along, but making every effort to really begin that transition to refer to this as a management engagement. As I said, this is a 2-year contract. We have held the overall compensation available under the contract at $3.7 million per year. That is split and shared between the base compensation and the performance benchmarks with which the manager must earn by achieving certain performance targets that we have established in the contract. That $3.7 million number reflects the final year of the prior contract, which was the lowest of the 3 years of remuneration under the prior contract, and we believed it was appropriate, as we discussed at our last meeting, to hold that number at the same level or lower. I'll briefly outline the performance benchmarks. You'll see that there is a rather lengthy attachment to the contract that goes into these in great detail. But the performance benchmarks are split over 4 different categories with varying weights for each category. These categories are academics. There are performance benchmarks related to engagement. That's community engagement and parent engagement and stakeholder engagement. There is a category of operations, which is focused on operational aspects of the district, and then a category focused on finance. I'll take these in descending order in terms of their relative weight in the contract. One of the things that we've done in this contract is we have broadened the number of benchmarks that we have in this contract. Last time, we only had a handful each year. And I think what we found through that is we weren't able to get the depth of impact that we would like through those benchmarks, and perhaps we're not as reflective of the priorities that we hope to set for MGT and GSR in this engagement. And so we have broadened those and cover a much wider scope of activities in the district and also capture, I think, a more comprehensive picture of the activities that we expect the emergency manager to perform well on and to focus their activities on. So the largest category of the performance benchmarks is the academics category. There are a number of benchmarks in this category comprising a total of 39% of the total amount of money dedicated to performance benchmarks, so that is available to be achieved. These benchmarks are spread across summative and formative assessments, the state assessments, as well as internal assessments conducted by Gary Community Schools and other districts. The graduation rate, outcomes for the Gary Area Career Center, things such as technical certifications and other things that would lead to good paying jobs after graduation. Also, student attendance and student suspensions are a focus there as well. The next largest category are the finance performance benchmarks. They comprise approximately 34% of the total benchmarks. They are spread across a smaller number of categories. The primary focus of this category is the balanced budget performance benchmark, as we've spoken at length over the course of the 3 years, but particularly in the last 6 months. Achieving a balanced budget in Gary Community Schools is absolutely central to achieving success in this engagement, and so we have duly emphasized that in the benchmarks. The other part of the benchmarks are conformance with the viable deficit reduction plan that is similar to the benchmark that is there today, as well as enrollment growth. Really, each of these is recognizing that it is imperative that we stabilize the district financially, and that there are a number of ways to accomplish that, and ideally that we will accomplish that in all 3 directions. The third category of performance benchmarks are the engagement benchmarks, and these are focused really on conversations that we had with MGT around the types of activities that they foresee engaging in the coming 2 years, and areas where we have encouraged them to prioritize their activities to really increase their level of engagement with the community, with parents, with students, and other stakeholders in the community. And so we have dedicated approximately 16% of the money in the contract to these benchmarks. One of the primary aspects of this category of benchmarks will be the establishment of a public-facing accountability dashboard, and that will be something that MGT rolls out here in the early fall for us, that really will provide a more comprehensive and in-depth picture of how Gary Community Schools is performing and how MGT is performing along a number of indicators related to the district. Other things that will be included in here include the establishment of public-facing FAQs for frequently asked questions. Obviously, there are a lot of questions that a lot of people share, and so our idea here is to increase transparency around the activities of the district and ensure that everyone has the same information. The other piece is establishing a number of standing and ad hoc committees related to particular types of engagements, such as the 1065 Capital Fund and other activities of the district. And these will be a number of committees focused on parents, teachers, and administrators, and a blend of all 3, really to provide a better opportunity for two-way communication between the district and the stakeholders who are there, and really provide an opportunity for those stakeholders to breathe into the engagement here and provide more input and have a greater voice in the process. And then lastly, we have tied one of the benchmarks to an engagement survey that is conducted annually by the University of Chicago. That measures engagement of the district with teachers and other stakeholders, and really focusing on the outcomes there and ensuring that we are meeting the expectations of the community. The final category is the operations category. This comprises approximately 11% of the total benchmarks. Here, we're focused on a number of things, ensuring that we adequately implement the one-to-one computing that has already begun, but ensuring that that is carried off in the next 2 years adequately and with success, and along with that, ensuring that network availability and connectivity are maintained at the highest levels. Another important piece of this is Gary Community Schools will create a de-escalation training program for their school resource officers to better equip their resource officers to engage with students on a number of issues and make them better partners in that process. Also, some focus on audits and ensuring that we are reducing our audit findings over time, particularly with respect to federal grants, as that is a large focus of the Department of Education, as well as the funding that is received by Gary Community Schools, and then also successful implementation of the School Improvement Fund plan from House Bill 1065 that we just heard an update on today. So that's a general overview of the contract. Obviously, there's a lot there. There's a lot of details. It's a lengthy contract. I'm happy to take any questions about it and talk through that and turn it over. One thing I will remind you is that if we do approve this contract today, it's not the end of the process. The contract does have to proceed through the normal state contract approval process, which includes review by the Department of Administration, the State Budget Agency, and the Attorney General's office. In general, we have checked with those offices where we expect to have questions from them in advance, and so we do not expect any hiccups in that process. But just a reminder that that process does follow what we do here today. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board members for questions or comments on the contract.
Mr. Chairman, I have several questions and comments.
Yeah, Representative Smith, please.
Okay. I'm sure all of you understand that we have a representative form of government, and I believe in it emphatically. And so I've received several correspondences as well as calls concerning this contract. One of the documents that I received was concerned about the public comments that are held, that are part of the advisory board meetings or any MGT community meetings. And Courtney has identified where that is in the contract, and for the benefit of the community, so we ask Courtney to share her information on that and how this has been addressed in the contract.
So, Representative Smith, if I heard you correctly, you're asking about ensuring that there is an opportunity for questions and answers with the with the management team in those regular updates that Dr. McNulty provides to the public.
That's correct.
That is something that we address in the contract. We included, well, we really added to the provision that requires those monthly meetings to require that the that the manager engage in questions and answers with the community and the parents and whoever attends those meetings. So there's an expectation that questions will be entertained and that answers will be provided either at that time if the information can be provided then, or in follow-up to that meeting to members. And then also there's an expectation, as I said, about the frequently asked questions, that those questions that are of a broader scope or of a wider interest will also be included on a web page that is publicly available on the Gary Community Schools website for all interested persons to view at any time.
Another point that was made was, even though the state was paying for this management team, community is asking for the elimination of performance incentives. The question is, why are we paying them for things that should be done? Why should we give them bonuses for things that should be doing in the normal operation and execution?
Yeah, thank you. I think the way I think of these performance incentives is that they are an opportunity to tie a portion of the remuneration under the contract to specific outcomes that we want the district to achieve, or that we want the manager to achieve, and that if they are not achieved, then that money is not paid to the manager. And so it really ties their compensation to what we expect from them, and is a way to drive their focus and focus their attention and their priorities where we know that they need to focus their time. And so, for example, one of the places that we have focused that in the area of academics is around the graduation rate. And so we have included performance benchmarks there to setting expectations, and I think they are significant expectations that MGT and Gary Community Schools will improve their graduation rate over the 2 years by a certain amount, and that if they do not achieve that, then they're not going to get paid part of the remuneration under that available under the contract.
On the flip side of that, since these are priorities for the DUAB board, for the management team, why aren't there penalties if there's a base amount that the contract includes? Why aren't there penalties when they fail to do some focus areas or complete some of these focus tasks and some of these priorities?
Yeah, thank you. So I actually think that these benchmarks work the same way as a penalty. Essentially, they're just phrased in a positive manner rather than in a negative manner. So whereas a penalty may operate to reduce the compensation if you didn't achieve it, here they can't achieve the compensation unless they achieve the certain performance target. And so I think it works. The result is the same under either scenario.
But they are getting a $2.9 million pay.
That's correct. The base compensation is set at that level.
Okay, and if they go through that first year, they cannot do any of the things that you asked, and still be just $2.9 million.
Yes, and so the base compensation is really a recognition that there is a certain level of resources, time, personnel, and others that at a minimum have to be committed to this engagement for it to be successful. And I think in reality, I don't think we could probably attract candidates to take on this project if they did not have some guarantee of a base level of income, because they're going to experience certain fixed costs regardless of what they do, and to ask them to put all of that at risk with performance incentives would likely either drive people away and or significantly increase the price of the engagement.
Another question is asked by the community pertaining to this issue is the publication of the financial report for the Gary Community Corporation. And in a letter, they attach a copy of the financial report for the Millville Community Corporation. And talking with Courtney, he says that the annual financial report for the Gary Community Corporation has been done. Evidently, the public is not privy to it and not aware of its complete response to that.
So I believe you're asking about the annual financial report that is submitted to the Department of Education.
Yes.
Annually, yeah. Courtney, do you want to speak to that? I think Dr. Smith is correct that has been submitted but is not yet available.
Yeah, actually, or Eric or Dr. McNulty, you all can feel free to jump in as well. I think the question is, have those reports been submitted? I believe there was some document that the constituents had indicated that it said that the report was not yet available. I do believe that Gary Schools has been working on ensuring that they have filed or successfully filed all of the required forms. They regularly file their Form 9. They do that twice a year. I know as of right now on the DOE webpage, I believe the Form 9 information through 2019 is currently available. I don't know that the Form 9 data for the first half of this year is yet available, but that is more of a process that occurs within DOE to evaluate that information before it becomes publicly available. But Eric, feel free to jump in as well if you'd like in terms of filing the various reports.
Yeah, nothing to add. I know the 2019 reports are available on the IDOE website, the Form 9s for all the categories. I know the Form 9 information through June 30th has been submitted, but I don't know if it's been pushed out by IDOE. That's something we can't control.
And my last question that comes from the community, myself personally about the contract from the community, is that the last question is a concern with the audience section that were a part of the state review from the state board of accounts. What is the status of those? immediate concern relative to the referendum about these audits.
So Representative Smith, I believe your question was around is the audit findings that have been included in the most recent reports from the State Board of Accounts, and what are the status of those?
Yes.
Yeah. Eric, do you want to speak to those, as those are more of a question for you?
Yeah, we go through SBOA audits annually. There have been audit resolutions for those findings. There are some that are still outstanding. Some are carried forward and resolved. Some are just carried forward and yet to be resolved. I think that's normal for most organizations to have that type of cadence. So we are getting ready for our next audit, and we will find out, we believe we'll present information that will resolve some of those past findings, but we don't have that yet until that next audit, which is just getting underway, will be complete.
And Paul, I know you...
we are in the middle of beginning an audit right now.
Yeah, it's kicking off.
And Paul, I know you've taken a look at this. I know you can't speak necessarily to the specifics of the audit that might be underway now, but you can speak generally to the timeline to resolve some of these findings, and I believe it was your opinion that some of these findings were multi-year fixes, and that they would take more time.
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chairman. And findings, and I will say that in Gary there are a lot of findings and a lot of comments within the report. All you have to do is look at the report to see that, and it definitely was a concern of ours that they do get addressed, and that is one of the reasons why I know when we talked about the contract initially that Justin thought it was very important that we put some of those in the contract itself to show that, you know, it is our expectation that the findings get addressed. And, you know, I will say part of the part of the plan that MGT did submit when Tammy did a review of the control documents was that all the findings would get to be corrected. And I believe that's one of the still is in the plan that they all do. One of the things people do need to realize is some things, as was pointed out, do take multiple years to correct. It is the expectation of every audit that if it's what's called a period arc, something that was able to be corrected in the current next period, it should be corrected. And we will definitely be going through, you know, as this is a 2-year contract, with the assumption that these are going to get corrected within the next 2 years. And without correction of the ones that are definitely in the prior period report, that, you know, from our aspect, it would be a failure from that standpoint as far as following the compliance of the state. And it would be noted such. And I'm sure anything moving forward would come into play on that. So we have 100% expectation that they will all be corrected as long as they can be corrected in a 1 period time frame. Unfortunately, some things do take 2-3 years and you know, to get corrected depending on what they are.
Thank you.
But each one will get looked at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question. You told me about the elimination of the word emergency, but based on the legislative document, the bill that created this process, would that have any impact on terminology?
So the adoption of the word emergency, or I'm sorry, the dropping of the word emergency from the title and the reference to manager is more of a symbolic gesture, and really one that I think is a recognition of the process and the progress that has been made towards resolving the situation financially. It doesn't have an impact on the statutory process or the statutory meaning of that word or the state's involvement in the process.
Okay. What I would like to see in this contract, and I think that was important previously, is that MDT be required to keep the local vendors and businesses before going outside of the community. I'm not sure if that's the case. I know it has not been the case in the past. They just used it whoever they wanted to use it. And yeah, thanks for that. I think that if we want the community support, then we got to support the community. So I would like to see that provision in this contract or some kind of memorandum of understanding. And then that they hire qualified their residents first before we start importing people from other communities into our community. And the dollars going back to their community, not turning over our community. Those two things that I would like to see included in this contract, and I will allow you to address those, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Smith. I know we spoke about this, or you and Courtney spoke about this previously, and we have given some thought to that about how to address that issue. And I think as we've thought through that and where it's most appropriately addressed, I think we believe that, in my opinion, it's best addressed through the board, setting those expectations here and resolving that through our normal meeting process. I think putting it in the contract may tie our hands in a way that does not leave us necessarily the flexibility. It also sets a precedent for getting into the details of the management of the district in a way that maybe the rest of the contract doesn't address that. I do believe it is a very important thing for us to address. I'm pleased to hear Mr. Parrish say that it is something that they are considering and will bring back to us at the next meeting. I know Mr. Parrish did not address the question of hiring in the district. He addressed vendors, but that is certainly something that I think we could work towards going forward.
Mr. Chairman, if you move over to page 6 or page 50 of 50, it talks about the formative assessment benchmark. I have some concerns about that. I think that the self-assessment is not an outside source, as is the case with iLearn and I Plus. They're getting feedback from a third source, outside source, with iLearn and I Plus. So with the formative assessment benchmark, they could be manipulated. Where are the controls there to give performance incentives from formative benchmarks? I understand the possibility that iLearn and iStep may not happen next year. But I'm just concerned about the formative assessment and the performance incentives.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Representative Smith. That is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about and discussing with education professionals here at the state who deal with these on a more regular basis. And I think it's the best alternative that we have to get a more complete picture of the academic performance within the district. The state assessments, assuming they happen, provide a window into that data, but they don't provide the full picture of what may be occurring in terms of academic process academic success or progress, and also deficiencies. And so, as we looked at the available data, it became clear that this would be the best alternative to track that data. I think while recognizing some of the deficiencies that are there in terms of it not being a neutral third party who is administering the test or otherwise reporting the data back to us. However, in our conversations with those experts here at the state, this particular assessment system, I believe it's the iReady system, will be implemented district-wide this year, and that it is a DOE-approved vendor, and that the way that the system works is that the students are benchmarked against averages for the iReady system as a whole. And so they have their own independent set of data through the iReady test or through the iReady organization, where they can look at student scores and data nationwide for wherever their test is used. And then they're able to apply that and benchmark the performance of the Gary students against that in the district. I think the other piece of this that gives me some comfort with the use of these formative assessments is that Dr. McNulty, we're not asking Dr. McNulty to implement these. This is something she was already planning to do, and my understanding is this is a best practice in K-12 education because it really provides real-time data to educators to evaluate their students and adjust their teaching and learning throughout the year. And so, it's a tool that's going to be used in the district to guide that learning. And for us, we just want to plug into that data and have a window into how that is performing. I think we have, in looking at the data, we have set some pretty high benchmarks, particularly in the area of requiring students to hit their individual student goals. There's a lot of data. We were able to get data on that from through iReady and elsewhere to show what the normal expectation is and where students typically score. And so what happens there is that's really looking at a student at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year and looking at their progress from one point in time to the next to see how did that individual student do in terms of their growth across the year. I think that's invaluable data that this board will benefit from and is important to recognize as we try to evaluate the performance of the manager in this case.
Well, what I'm concerned about, and I'm very familiar with iReady. My question is, as the child is tested, is there an outside entity that also receives that data, or is it just maintained by the classroom itself?
I'll have to let Dr. McNulty address the specifics of that. I believe the way that the data is scored is that the students take the data or take the exam, and then the data is matched against the benchmark data that the iReady organization has in its system already, and so you're scoring it in that way. Dr. McNulty, can you provide a little more context and depth on that?
But iReady is a vendor, much like NOEA and WEA, so they would be the ones that would be scoring it and providing us with the scores and the documentation. So yes, they would be holding those scores, providing that information to us after the students take the test. Okay, so it's not an immediate response that a student gets and the teacher gets when they are doing these formative assessments? They will get an immediate, but we're not the one tabulating the score. It's done through the iReady vendor. And they print a report as well? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's done through the system.
Page 16 of the contract, we listed some key persons. We've seen MGT change lead managers to lead the managers 3 times under the last contract. When you list these key persons, suppose they don't hold these positions or be dealt with, if you list them in the contract.
Yeah, so the reason we include what we have called the management lead in the key persons section, and in this case it's Dr. McNulty who serves in that role. Eric Parrish is also listed as a key person as the engagement manager overall for MGT. But one of the real values that brings for us as a board is it ensures that we have an opportunity to weigh in on the selection of that individual. to be the lead manager and serve in the role that Dr. McNulty serves in. And it provides us an opportunity to evaluate that candidate and ensures that MGT has to seek our input in the hiring of that individual. And the reason for that is we believe that that person is so critical and so central to the endeavor. Obviously, they are the most public-facing person of the endeavor, and so they're a person who is central to the success of the engagement overall.
Okay, on page 27, item number 2, it says the manager shall supervise the fiscal management board. That action very bothers me.
Yeah. Courtney, I believe that has that's related to the statutory language. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, that language does come from the statute. The statute indicates that the Fiscal Management Board is under the supervision of the manager. I agree with you. I don't necessarily believe that they have a direct supervision type of relationship. I think it's more the manager in Gary Schools supports the Fiscal Management Board. But for the purposes of being consistent with the statute, we are continuing to use that supervise verb.
Any other questions regarding the contract or comments?
I'm going through your business.
Oh, okay.
Looking for my notes. Okay, I guess that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Smith. Are there other comments or questions regarding the contract?
Yeah, I do have
Justin,
one.
This is Rebecca. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll take. I think I heard Tracy first, and then Rebecca.
Thank you. Can someone walk us through how the benchmarks are impacted if there is a decision at the federal government level to waive assessments again this year due to COVID?
Yeah.
Can someone speak to that piece?
We spent a lot of time thinking about how the benchmarks are impacted by COVID. I think ultimately on a general scale where we landed was that there's too many possible contingencies to anticipate in the contract, and we didn't want a 500-page contract. And so we have included a provision in there that identifies specific benchmarks that we believe could be impacted by COVID. And there is a recognition by both parties that those are eligible to be renegotiated if they are significantly impacted by COVID-related events, but it doesn't take a position on what happens. With respect to state assessments, though, we did feel that we could resolve that one because that one was more there were less eventualities related to that one, and so how the contract addresses that one is that it says if the state assessments are not offered, so it ties it to whether they're offered, not to whether the federal government decides to do anything with them. But if they are offered by the state in the year, then the benchmarks remain. If the state makes the decision not to conduct the assessment, then the amount of money tied to those benchmarks is reallocated proportionately to the formative assessment benchmark as the next best proxy of educational performance during the year.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Tracy?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Rebecca?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you and Courtney for walking us through a very complicated contract and the amount of work that was put into it, and I would say very thoughtfully. And I just wanted to thank you for not only doing that job, but also reiterating today the highlights of things that were really important in the contract. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that. It was a team effort, and there were we each had a different vacation in there, and we're working remotely to negotiate that contract. And I think we're both very pleased with how it turned out. And really, I'd like to commend the MGT team and their attorneys. They were very flexible, and we had a lot of good discussions to be able to resolve the issues in that contract.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to echo the same thing that Rebecca said, that this contract recognizes the current situation that we're in, both fiscally, economically, and from an education standpoint and teaching our children. Certainly commend you and Courtney, along with the Gary Schools Recovery Team, for bringing us a contract that was very, very specific benchmarks. You know, I asked for specific benchmarks and additional benchmarks, both fiscally and academically. You even exceeded that, and so there are significant additional transparency points in this contract for both us as a board and the local community. There's significant enhancements to the academic indicators and improving those, and then there's also additional opportunities for the community to be involved. So I congratulate you on a very, very good contract. I think we could say it's not perfect, but in today's current situation, I think it's an outstanding contract. So thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I want to thank you and Courtney specifically for involvement that you allowed me to have in this situation. I really appreciate it. Totally different than my last term on.
Appreciate that. And
okay, I appreciate you. And I want to thank Mr. Bennett and Mr. George also, because the community feels from these Zoom meetings that you really care about this and what happens after this. So as it works for my people, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. I've had some very productive conversations with several of the of your advisory board members and of the community, and I appreciate. We're going to continue that dialogue, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with them. I'm not going to share our conversations because I don't have their permission, but I would say they were both frank, honest, and very productive, and I think it helped move the ball forward. So appreciate that very much.
Yeah, I would like to start by saying that, one, I'm sorry we have to be doing a contract. You know, it's not where 4 years ago where I know we had hoped we would be in this process going forward, and it's unfortunate, you know, that we're doing it right now, and in light of the pandemic that is going on. I do feel we're doing it out of a necessity to hopefully get to the end line, and I definitely look forward to that end line. I definitely want everybody to know that this is not something that we enjoy or want to do, as far as working, you know, instead of the public, you know, toward getting the school to where it needs to get. I do, however, believe that, and it's not in the contract, and it shouldn't be, because it is a community issue, that, you know, that the operating referendum is necessary, you know, to make this a success and go forward. And I truly hope that the operating referendum passes. I wish it would pass with 100% of people voting for it. It says, Gary, I want this school back. I want to run this school. I don't want, you know, MGT there or the state here. We can do it as a community. You know, I'll work with, you know, I know there's fears that the operating referendum won't work. I can work with the other board members, I know Justin will, to ensure that the money is used toward the success of the school. And I think when we started this, that's all we're looking for, is success of the school. And these 2 years need to bring that success to an end. And that, you know, that's really, you know, that's the focus that we need to look at toward these 2 years. So hopefully this is the conclusion of where we're going to go. And that's what I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions, or I would be willing to entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the contract between the Distress Unit Appeals Board and Gary School Recovery LLC as presented.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Rebecca will second.
Dual seconds.
I'll defer to Rebecca's second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right. Well, with that, Courtney, would you call the roll?
Paul Joy,
Yes.
Wes Bennett,
Yes.
Tracy Brown,
I just want to say a couple words before I vote. The department, as evidenced by my prior vote, believes that a one-year contract extension would be sufficient. However, having already made that point, I do vote yes today.
thank you. Rebecca Kubacki,
Yes.
and Justin McAdam.
Yes.
5-0.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all. I would like to echo Mr. Joyce's comments. I think we are turning a corner in this endeavor, and it is certainly my sincere hope that through this referendum and through the continued effort of the NGT team and Dr. McNulty and others, that we will be able to achieve the success that we were charged with at the 3 years ago in 2017, and really turn the Gary schools back over to the community and leave it in a better position than we found it. With that, that concludes our formal business for the day. Is there any new business to come before the board today? All right, hearing none, we are adjourned. Well, I say that, Courtney has one final sign-off piece to say.
Sorry, I always forget about that as well. Just a reminder for those as you log off of the WebEx experience, a survey will pop up. That is for WebEx, not for DUAB. So if you do have feedback that you'd like to provide to DUAB, please do so at duab@duab.in.gov. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we are.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.